For Godzilla's 20th anniversary, director Jun Fukuda returned for one final adventure with the kaiju. This time, he would pit Godzilla against a new foe, the alien-controlled Mechagodzilla, with help from its old friend Anguirus and a new ally, the mystical slumbering King Caesar, in 1974's Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla.
Let them fight.
You're a wizard, Harry.
You're gonna need a bigger boat. I'll be back.
Death has come to your little town, June.
Hey everyone, how's it going? Welcome back to Chills and Thrills. My name is Connor Dunham, and once again I am joined with Chris. Chris, doing what I've heard is one of your favorites today.
Yeah, I have a huge soft spot for this one, for nostalgia, but also out of a lot of the ones that I watched as a little kid on VHS tape, this one seems to kind of hold up the best, even watching it as an adult. So I'm excited to talk about this one.
All right, and for everyone else, today we are doing Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. This isn't one of the ones I watched a lot as a kid, honestly. I did still watch it quite a bit, but not as much as some of the other films. I know there's a couple parts in this that kind of annoyed me, such as like the singing, but we'll get into that. All right. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla is a 1974 Japanese kaiju film directed by Jun Fukuda with special effects by Teruyoshi Nakano and distributed by Toho and produced under the effects subsidiary Toho Eizo. It is the 14th film in the Godzilla franchise and features the fictional monster characters Godzilla, Anguirus, King Caesar, and along with a new mecha character in Mechagodzilla. The film stars Masaki Demon, Kazuya Aomo, Goro Matsumi, and Akihiko Harada, with Isao Sushi as Godzilla, Satoru Kazumi as both Anguirus and King Caesar, and Kazunari Mori as Mechagodzilla. And this film marks the first appearance of King Caesar and Mechagodzilla in the franchise. So I do like this one. It is good. But I guess we'll just have to see come later in the episode where we actually rank it in our tier list.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, after we get through trailer and breakdown, we'll do some overall thoughts, and then we'll get into the sections. But yeah, I this one's gonna be fun. This one's fun for me.
Yeah, and feel free because I know you said you have a lot to say about this one, so I will let you ramble once we get to it.
Yeah, and I mean, it might actually not be a terribly huge amount. It might be a lot of I really love it. It's great, but we'll see. We'll see as we go through.
All right. Well, I'll get into a trailer. I'll bring in a plot synopsis, and then we'll get back to her.
Sounds good.
젊은와 빙무시 살다 그야.
君は誰だ？大宇宙ブラックホール第三惑星の地球征服司令官です。
In Okinawa, an Azumi priestess has a vision of a city being destroyed by a giant monster. Meanwhile, Masahiko Shimizu discovers a type of metal not found on Earth while spelunking and takes it to Professor Miyajima for examination. An excavation led by Masahiko's brother Kaisuke uncovers a chamber filled with ancient artifacts and a mural bearing an ominous prophecy. When a black mountain appears above the clouds, a huge monster will arise and try to destroy the world. But when the red moon sets and the sun rises in the west, two monsters shall appear to save the people. Kaisuke is joined by archaeologist Saiko Kaneshiro, who translates the prophecy and takes a statue bearing the likeness of Okinawa's guardian monster King Caesar to study. Two men stalk them, one claiming to be a reporter while the other attempts to steal the statue but fails and leaves. Following the appearance of a black cloud resembling a mountain, Godzilla emerges from Mount Fuji and begins a destructive rampage despite having become tolerant of humans within the past years. Godzilla's ally, Anguirus, confronts it, only to be nearly killed and forced to retreat. Kaisuke arrives shortly after to check on Masahiko and Miyajima. Godzilla's rampage continues until the real Godzilla emerges to fight it, exposing it as an imposter called Mechagodzilla, a massive robot armed with advanced weaponry made of the same strange metal later revealed to be space titanium. Godzilla is severely wounded but inflicts some damage on Mechagodzilla before both monsters retreat. Miyajima hypothesizes, based on Mechagodzilla's advanced technology and composition, that the robot is an alien superweapon. Kaisuke and Saiko take the statue back to the temple but are confronted by the thief once again. During the fight, the skin on half of the stranger's face melts away, revealing an ape-like visage. The intruder attempts to kill Kaisuke, but an unseen gunman kills him before Kaisuke and Saiko catch a brief glimpse of the reporter. Currently, Godzilla arrives on Monster Island during a thunderstorm and is struck by lightning multiple times, reinvigorating itself. Masahiko, Miyajima, and his daughter Ikuko explore the cave where the space titanium was first found, but are captured by ape-like aliens from the third planet of the black hole, who plan to use Mechagodzilla to conquer Earth. Their leader, Kuronuma, forces Miyajima to repair the robot, while Saiko checks into a hotel and guards the statue. Kaisuke leaves to meet Masahiko at the caves, only to encounter the reporter who reveals himself as Nambara, an Interpol agent who has been tracking the aliens. After Nambara and Kaisuke infiltrate the alien base and free the prisoners, Kaisuke and Ikuko leave to pick up Saiko and the statue, while Miyajima, Nambara, and Masahiko stay behind, only to be recaptured by Kuronuma. The next morning, a lunar eclipse results in a red moon and a mirage of the sun rising in the west. Seeing this, the team realizes that they have to awaken King Caesar. They meet with the priestess and her grandfather and place the statue in the temple, revealing King Caesar's resting place. As Kuronuma dispatches Mechagodzilla, the priestess sings to awaken King Caesar, and Godzilla appears shortly afterward. The two monsters join forces to fight Mechagodzilla. When the robot tries to escape, Godzilla uses its stored electricity to create an electromagnetic field to attract Mechagodzilla before tearing off its head, causing it to explode. While the mortified aliens are extracted, Nambara and the others free themselves, kill their captors, and sabotage the base, fleeing as it explodes. With the enemy defeated, Godzilla heads out to sea, and King Caesar returns to his resting place while the humans rejoice.
Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla was released theatrically in Japan on March 21st, 1974. The film received a limited release in the United States in 1977 by Cinema Shares under the title Godzilla vs. the Bionic Monster. It was then quickly re-released under the title Godzilla vs. the Cosmic Monster, which was also the UK theatrical title. Now, I do have of course, some fun facts, some numbers for you, but I didn't know if you wanted to talk about this film and why you like it so much before I get into some of that.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, well, I'll kind of do some overall thoughts here. Out of the '70s ones, the 1970s films, it the it's hard to pick between the two Mechagodzilla movies, but I definitely think that the two Mechagodzilla films are definitely the best, my favorite Godzilla films of the '70s. Of the films that Jun Fukuda directed, this one is absolutely my favorite one that he directed. Of the films that Masaru Sato composed, I definitely think that this one is his best score. So this is that pairing. This a lot of the folks that worked on this kind of worked on a couple of Godzilla movies, and for me, I think this is the strongest collaboration of this team, and so it stands out for me in that regard, and I think it strikes the kind of perfect balance of, these '70s movies get a little weird, get a little kind of outlandish, but this one kind of threads the needle the best in terms of kind of staying kind of like keeping credibility while still having like all of the best things about the '70s movies, the sort of the fights and the wild kind of musical score and plot, while not feeling like it gets sort of silly, with sliding drop kicks and flying Godzilla and things like that. This one kind of feels like it's all of the best things about the '70s movies and none of the or the least amount of the bad things. The stock footage holds back the '70s movies. Some of the low budgets hold back the '70s movies. This one feels like it kind of has the best production value of the '70s movies and all of the things you love about the '70s movies with the fewest drawbacks. So this is why this one always stands out as a favorite for me.
Okay, I'm 100% in agreement with you on that. Glad the stock footage was per se dispatched of for this.
Yeah, if there is any, it doesn't really stand out to me if there's any used.
Yeah, I mean, there might be some of like the civilians running away or something, but it's nothing I noticed.
Yeah, agreed.
Well, I'll go into some fun facts for you. I got a couple that were interesting on the film. This Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla is Godzilla's 20th anniversary film, which, if you're even somewhat of a Godzilla fan, you should know that. The suit used to portray the disguised Mechagodzilla in this film would later be used at the end of Terra Mechagodzilla to show Godzilla swimming away back into the ocean. This film marks the second time Godzilla draws strength from lightning. The first was in Ebra Horror of the Deep, and the third will be in The Return of Godzilla in a couple years. Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla is the last Godzilla film directed by Jun Fukuda. Fukuda was originally intended to direct a late '70s Godzilla film tentatively titled King of Monsters: Resurrection of Godzilla, but he was transferred to another film called The War in Space instead.
That would have been a fascinating thing to see. I know the late '70s there was consideration about a sort of 25th anniversary remake or 25th anniversary reboot of some kind, and it would have been very interesting to see that come to fruition, but never happened.
Nope, and I think this is probably his strongest film. It might not be my favorite by Jun Fukuda, I guess we'll see, but it's probably his strongest film.
Yeah, I'm just in that camp where I think it's his strongest, and for me personally, it's my favorite.
Strangely, when Nami the Azumi princess has her vision at the beginning of the film foretelling of a monster coming to destroy mankind, it is portrayed through the film stills from Ghidorah the three-headed monster and submersion of Japan with flames overlaid on him. King Ghidorah can clearly be seen in the shots, and his roar is used as background sound, but King Ghidorah does not make an appearance at any point in the remainder of the film, nor is he ever mentioned by name.
Yeah, almost like they were setting up, like even though the film's called Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla, it's almost as if they were trying to set up that King Ghidorah was going to arrive. You know?
Yeah, wouldn't that have been something serious? Godzilla takes out Mechagodzilla, and then Ghidorah shows up and is like, "All right, round two."
Yeah, or I as a little kid, I kind of always took it as something that like she's seeing a vision and she's saying a monster's going to come destroy Japan, and maybe it's just sort of in the context of this world, King Ghidorah would be what people would imagine. When you say like a monster's coming, people would think of one of the worst ones they've encountered, so they would just kind of think of something like King Ghidorah. Like those images are almost flashbacks of people remembering what King Ghidorah did, as opposed to a literal shot of what's coming.
Yeah, because he clearly in earlier films he's destroyed the city 3 or 4 times. They've had problems with him.
Yeah, exactly.
And then my last one I got is Ryuhei Kitamura, the director of Godzilla Final Wars, has stated that Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla is his favorite Godzilla film, with King Caesar being his favorite of all the kaiju.
Yeah, when we eventually get to Final Wars, there's that's a movie that definitely, for better or worse in some regards, kind of took Godzilla back by 30 years, and you can see the affinity for the 70s films in that movie. And like I said, for better or worse, it's a fun throwback to the silly stuff of the 70s, but there's good and bad things that come with that.
Yep, and that's going to be a fun one as well because I used to honestly hate Final Wars, and it's grown on me a little bit. So that
Yeah,
one.
agreed. 13-year-old me loved Final Wars. Adult me hated it probably for like 5 to 10 years, but now I just come back around and like I love it for all the insanity that it is.
Yeah, it's definitely out there, like you said. Going back to the late '60s, early '70s films where it's just constant cheese. All right, I'm gonna go into my favorite character if you're all right with that.
Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead.
I liked Professor Hideto Miyajima, I believe is how you pronounce that.
Mm-hmm.
I liked him.
Akihiko Hirata.
Yep. I liked him. He was just a guy trying to make a living, but then when people he loved or cared about were in danger, he was forced to work on Mechagodzilla and help the aliens from the black hole planet 3, and he just kind of didn't have a choice, so he did what he could to save who he loved, and in the end, they planned to kill him anyway, and eventually they got away, thankfully. But I see myself in a character like that where you're just in a spot where you have to do this, or somebody you care about dies, so you have no choice but to help them even though you don't want to.
Yeah, absolutely, and he's got that pipe gimmick that comes in handy, and it's one of those kind of wild things where it's introduced early in the movie to set up for the third act, and it feels like something so odd and specific that it's like, well, what's the practical use one would have for a pipe that is like a magnet in between and disrupts machines, except for the very specific thing they use it for. But it's one of those that's one of those fun, kind of subtle, funny 70s things about the movie. It's like they have they have this pipe that's like, oh, take it into two pieces, then it becomes a magnet, and then it disrupts machines, and then it comes in handy at the end. Like, it's a wild thing, but I love that about his character. Uh, I'm a fan. This is one of the movies where one of the supporting characters always stood out for me as a kid, and it's Nambara, the Interpol agent, because they do this fun thing with this character where for the first, half or 2/3 of the movie, they kind of set him up as if he's going to be this, like, he's like this creepy, villainous looking character that seems to be tailing and following the heroes around. And then it turns out that he's an Interpol agent, and he's kind of a badass, and he saves their lives a couple times, and I always just dug his character, that kind of like silent, cool guy. So he always stood out for me as a kid. He's always someone that I remembered from this movie.
Yeah, I liked him as well. There were some good characters in this, and then there were others that kind of just left me feeling bland. But yeah, I always, even watching it now, you think the looks of that guy, you think like something's up. He's not on our side. He's going to go against us, and then it turns out that he is on the side for greater good, and it's like, oh, awesome! This guy fooled us 3/4 of the film.
Yeah, and speaking of that, there's the main character, the sort of, well, kind of the main character, the construction engineer, Kaisuke Shimizu, who's he's sort of our leading guy, but the character that always seemed like kind of like a little superfluous and pointless is his brother. Like, his brother just seems to kind of be there. Everyone else seems to have a bit of a functioning role in the plot, and his brother's just kind of there.
Yeah, he's just another guy to get caught.
Yeah,
so kind of keep moving the plot forward.
It feels like this is, like they have like 5 or 6 kind of main folks in this movie, and it feels like it probably could have been rolled some of these characters together, like there's 2 sort of scientists that like there's the one who's played by the guy who was in Mothra versus Godzilla and a number of things, and then there's the one played by Akihiko Hirata, and it just feels I don't know, or the archaeologist and the scientist, but like it feels like a couple of these extra characters could have maybe been folded together into one another and streamlined, but that's neither here nor there.
Yeah, you got to keep the plot moving. You got to, these movies have certain characters. In some films, they have a character just to make 1 or 2 lines in the film that keep it moving forward.
Exactly,
exactly. It all works together. This is a good film, and this is probably one of the better group of characters we've seen recently.
Yeah. And while we're on it, I have to admit, when I was a kid growing up, I always found the leading lady in this movie, played by Reiko Tajima, Saiko Kanagusku, I always found her to be just like very, very pretty when I was growing up. I always like, as a little kid, like I always just like had a crush on that lady. I'm not sure why.
Well, coming from Godzilla vs. Megalon, where there are no females really that are main characters, and then you get a pretty one in this film, it helps, and that might be one. Might be one of the reasons she looks a little cuter. Is we were looking at 3 to 5 grown men the entire last film.
yeah, never hurts there. Never hurts there.
All right, I'll go right into my favorite score, because I feel like I know both of us like this soundtrack quite a bit. My favorite one was called Godzilla vs. Anguirus, and it sounded something like this. So I feel like it's almost like a fun, like something you would put to like a surfing video or something, just like a upbeat. And I feel like that's one of the main themes of this film. And that's the scene where Mechagodzilla just destroys Anguirus, and I love that soundtrack. I don't know why that one caught my attention, but that was probably my favorite of the
Yeah,
film.
yeah, I'm in 100% agreement. I love that track. There's something like some people have kind of called it like a little like jazzy or something like that. I'm not sure exactly how you'd categorize the track, but I have all like that's one of those that if I were to have to pick like a top 10 tracks from the Showa era, like that would be a likely candidate to make one of my top tracks. I just something about it is just so relentlessly like entertaining and fun to listen to, and it feels so to be such like an offbeat and fun kind of a song for like the theme of the villain of the movie. It's so off kilter, but it kind of just like really works in an interesting way. Like it's like it's got this sort of enthusiasm about it, and it captures the kind of the energy of the movie. It's kind of like it's quirky, it's a little weird, but it's also like kind of badass and cool. Like I don't know, it's something about that track is just iconic to me.
Yeah, and that's speaking of that, that's something we could definitely do for the Showa era or each era. We can add another episode as our top like 10 favorite soundtracks from the Showa era, the Heisei, the Millennium. I think that would be a fun conversation to have.
Oh gosh, yeah, that would be fun. Good lord, the last thing I need is another top 10 ranking to worry about, but that would be fun.
Hey, we'll keep adding them up. We got nothing better to do. We got life to live and Godzilla to talk about.
Yeah. Yep.
I'll ask you. I'll let you go ahead on if you had a favorite quote or most memorable line for this film.
Yeah, and for this one, I'm a dub watcher on this one. This is one that I pretty much never opt to watch subtitled. I've got the nostalgia for the dub, and so I just kind of have a preference for that. And for me, I'm absolutely picking a line that I always thought was funny, and as an adult, I think it's one of the funniest lines, probably the funniest line in the entire movie. So I went with a total humorous line, and it's a dialogue exchange where Professor Miyajima says, "This material can only be space titanium," and the character responds, "Space titanium? You mean it's from outer space?" and that never ceases to make me laugh out loud every time I watch the movie. It's like it's called Space Titanium, and his amazing deduction. You mean it's from outer space? I love it. That's my favorite line in the movie.
Yeah, it's just that like almost like little comedy club type humor where it's open mic night, and that's one of the jokes you tell, and it just cracks people up because you're like, yes, I said space titanium, like
Yeah,
common sense here.
yeah, and the performance of the dub is it's like it kind of reads as like, is the guy being sarcastic? Is he being kind of a smartass, or is he like genuinely deducing it? It's like oh, like this is like like this is Texas corn. Like, oh, you mean it's from Texas? Like I don't know. It's just like it's just funny to me. I love everything about that line. I'm like I could have picked a more serious line, but I have to highlight that bit of dialogue.
Oh no, I agree with you because I feel like we always end up talking about the humorous and like the little comedy shots they throw in these movies. So that's a perfect line to pick.
Yeah, and I don't think I don't think the humor and the fun side of these movies really get like sometimes it's not highlighted as much as it should be. That these the humans aren't terribly serious characters in most of these movies. It's a little lighthearted all around.
No, especially if you watch the dubs over the original Japanese versions, you're going to get more of that comedic entertainment.
Yeah, it adds to it. It adds to the character of the film.
Well, I did watch the Japanese version, and mine is kind of a bland quote. It's from the commander of the Black Hole Planet 3. I believe his name was Kiranuma. His quote is when Godzilla appears. He says, "Godzilla, you are mistaken if you think you are a match for Mechagodzilla." And I just liked how cocky and like how much confidence he had in the Mechagodzilla that they built. That like you're not even a match. Like Mechagodzilla is going to destroy you with no problem. And then like halfway through that first fight, you see Godzilla kind of putting up a little battle and holding his own, and he kind of looks nervous. And it's like, oh well, I thought you just said he was no match. Like you're not so confident now.
Yeah, it's a great line. That he's a really he's always been a memorable villain to me with that sort of black splotch on his face. Like always stuck with me as a kid, and and famously in the dub, that line leads off with "Damn Godzilla." You know, he has you know so I always liked that line as well. You know, so yeah, that's a great one.
And that line is also part of my favorite scene in the film, which is the first battle where Godzilla shows up. He appears out of the building and he says that line. And then we get the probably one of the greatest reveals of a monster in the Godzilla franchise, which is Mechagodzilla revealing his true form and the hand spinning, the jaw dropping a little bit, and just like kind of giving us like little teasers of like Mechagodzilla before showing the actual full form. And we'll get into it with monster design, but I absolutely love this 74 Mechagodzilla design and that first reveal.
Yeah, absolutely. If that is that favorite scene for you?
Yes.
Cool. Yeah. For my favorite scene, it would be gosh, I love almost every minute of the monster screen time in this movie, but I mean that's such a cop out to say everything the monsters do. It's a tough near tie for me between uh, Mechagodzilla's absolute thrashing and beatdown of Anguirus and the scene where Godzilla's in the rain being struck by lightning. I think I'll go with the Oh man, I think I've got to go with Mechagodzilla beating down Anguirus because it's just that scene just goes so hard. You know, it's sold initially as if it might be Godzilla. If you've never seen the movie before, it's kind of making you think that it's Godzilla. You know, and but then you see like he gets the damage on the arm and it's kind of shiny metal and just the absolute beatdown that he puts on Anguirus with that soundtrack. It is just one of the greatest introduction scenes to a villain. You know, it's sort of like classic Dragon Ball Z style, where you have a prominent character get completely thrashed by the villain to establish how awesome and powerful the villain is. And you know, Mechagodzilla has this moment where after he's like tossed Anguirus around a bit, he's like brushing the dirt off of himself. You know, he's got the swagger to him, and he hyper extends Anguirus's jaw, and it's like gushing blood, and it's just so brutal. Like the scene always stuck with me as a kid.
Yeah, my first time watching that, I was just like, why is Godzilla doing this? You know, like Anguirus and him were, you know, they were tag team champs 2 movies ago, and now he's just wrecking him. And when I was a kid, that just made me super sad. And I guess as a kid, I never paid attention to the little piece that Anguirus knocks off the shoulder or the arm that shows that it's metal or titanium underneath, you know. And finally, when I seen that, I was just like, oh, okay, something. I get it. It wasn't Godzilla, but like that was probably the second or third time I seen the film when I was 6, 7 years old, or maybe possibly younger, that I understood. Like, all right, because as a kid, I never paid attention to the plot, to them saying Anguirus was calling out to Godzilla, you know. So
Yeah,
after like a second or third watch,
yeah,
I finally got it.
yeah, and I like that they commit, like even in the early appearances when Mechagodzilla has the Godzilla skin on, like the movements, the foot stomps sound mechanical. The movements are kind of made to look a little mechanical. The energy breath coming out of the mouth is yellow instead of blue. The roar is like the Mechagodzilla roar. Like they committed to doing like to showing you that like there's kind of something off about this Godzilla to kind of foreshadow and hint, you know, who it really was. and I like that.
Yeah, clearly I was just a kid that didn't care about paying attention and just wanted the monster fights.
Yeah, and the visual of when Mechagodzilla has the skin on, the visual of seeing like two Godzillas facing off, even just for those brief moments, was always a really cool one.
Yeah, absolutely. I love everything about the fight scenes in this film, and Godzilla just takes a beating and keeps kicking.
100%.
All right, well, I guess I can get into some numbers for you, and then we can go into monster design, and we can just be little fanboys when we talk about the monster designs of this film.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, so for some numbers, this film made slightly more money than Godzilla vs. Megalon. It was still not making like as big a box office profit as the other Godzilla films in this series, like in the early 60s. The 1974 Japanese release earned income of 370 million yen, and it also grossed 17 million overseas for a total of about 20 million by 1980. The film sold approximately 1,330,000 tickets in Japan, which was about 350,000 more than the previous Godzilla film, which was Godzilla vs. Megalon. Godzilla's on screen for 10 minutes and 24 seconds, or 13 seconds of the film. So if you add in all the Mechagodzilla scenes and whatnot, where he's alone and beating up Anguirus and stuff, you probably got about 30 minutes or close to 30 minutes of a 84-minute film of monster action, which is fantastic. That's in the 37%.
Yeah, this one definitely finds a good balance, a good sweet spot. It feels like it's all, instead of all congested kind of to the finale, it feels like we get some good moments, throughout the film for the monster screen time. You get a little bit of Anguirus at the very beginning. You get Mechagodzilla showing up as disguised Godzilla for a while. He's rampaging. He beats down Anguirus. Godzilla shows up. They have their first fight. Then you segue into the big finale with Mechagodzilla, King Caesar Godzilla. It's a really this one's one of those if you were to pick a random Godzilla movie to show someone kind of like what the 70s Godzilla movies are all about or what they represent, this would kind of be one of the ones that you could easily lean into and just show a normie,
Yeah, Godzilla's first appearance is at 26 minutes and 53 seconds into the film, or 32% of the way into the film, which I thought was interesting to learn because that means Anguirus shows up at 15 minutes or so into the film, and then he gets beat up by Mechagodzilla, and that 26 minutes and 53 seconds is the appearance of their first fight. And then another 10 minutes later, you got Godzilla in the lightning and the rain. And then, like you said, it goes into King Caesar and then the final battle. So it's really broken up well in this film, like you said.
Yeah, and I got to give a shout out to Godzilla in the Rain. One of the things, I talked about sort of like the Dragon Ball Z connections earlier, and it really landed with me when I watched it this time. To go on a little bit of a sidetrack here, there's a character in Dragon Ball Z that, when he gets, there's a scene where he gets defeated by androids coincidentally, and then he goes into the rain and screams about his failure. And whenever I see Godzilla standing in the rain getting struck by lightning after losing to Mechagodzilla the first time, it always makes me think of that scene from Dragon Ball Z where the character is just screaming in the rain and raging at how badly he was just completely decimated by Mechagodzilla. And he's getting struck by lightning, and it always feels like he's got to turn his weakness into a strength, he's shown weakness to lightning and electricity in the past, and he's letting himself get hit by it over and over again to kind of turn his weakness into a strength. And I always just loved it. It just always felt like a character scene to me,
Yeah, and there's a lot of, I guess you could say, character scenes for Godzilla in this film with
personality.
Yep. Turning himself into a magnet and stuff like that. The scene in the rain where he's I guess you could per se, getting electrocuted. And there's a lot of good shots in this film coming off a lot of movies that were a lot of stock footage.
Yeah, and it really kind of shows that with a little bit of experience and maybe a little bit more resources, production value, that the folks that are responsible, that are quote unquote responsible for some of the worst of the late '60s, early '70s movies, could really deliver the goods when they had the ability to. The team that did Godzilla versus Megalon turns right around and delivers this one. And it's like a night and day difference in terms of sort of the quality and legitimacy of the movies. And so it's nice that director, that Jun Fukuda has something like this under his belt to show that it's like, oh no, he wasn't just like the schlocky bad '70s director. It's like, no, he was kind of making movies at a really tough time to be making Godzilla movies. And when given his moments, Son of Godzilla, a movie like this, he has his ability to shine. And I appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely. I would have loved to have seen what he could have done with a big budget.
Mm-hmm.
But this film has a 86% on Rotten Tomatoes. It is rated a 6.2 out of 10 on IMDb, and 84% of Google users liked this film. So a little lower on the Google users, which is usually the ones we rely on for our high percentage numbers.
Yeah, and that's odd to me. Like, this one is just like, this one, like, I'm sorry, this one's not only gold, not only platinum. I would rate this one as space titanium.
All right, we got Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, our first space titanium ranking.
Yeah, that would be, oh man, if you ever do, those videos where they do the tier lists, for the Showa era, like space titanium would have to be the tier above A.
Absolutely. That's all I got on numbers for you on this film. We're kind of winging by on this one. It's going quick.
Yeah, and it's a shame that we talked in the last episode about how Godzilla vs. Megalon was one that kind of hit at the right place and right time to be very popular in America. You can read about the strong ticket sales it had at the American theaters and how it had like a high profile network premiere and this big ad campaign. And it's such a shame because like that same distribution company or team also distributed this in America, and this one just didn't hit in the right way. And it's such a shame because this is such a better representation of the '70s era. It's like if this had been kind of like The Chosen Child, they hit at the right place, right time, got the big ticket sales, got the big network premiere, it's like it would have just done so much better for the '70s movie's reputation than Godzilla versus Megalon.
Yeah, and this film is, I believe that it's better in my own opinion than Godzilla vs. Megalon. Do I enjoy it more?
Not take it all.
No, not not at all. Do I enjoy it more? I guess we'll find out. Like I said, I do believe it's.
Oh my goodness!
I'm sensing some judgment.
Yeah, maybe. We will get to it.
All right. Well, before that, let's get to some monster design. Since we just seen Anguirus, let's start on him. I'll let you go first.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of Anguirus' usual look, but he had some really good moments in the movie. The beginning, I remember it was interesting. The very beginning of the movie, one of the first shots is Anguirus kind of, I think he's in, I don't know if it's like Siberia or some kind of mountainous, snowy region. And the VHS copy I had as a kid was so kind of dark and worn out that the only thing you could kind of see in that shot was Anguirus. And then I remember when I finally got the DVD, the image was so much more clear that you could see that he was kind of in like a snowy mountain range. And it was like, it could just completely change my perception of the shot. And I'm like, man, that was one of the early examples of me as a little kid where the jump from VHS to DVD was dramatic. But Anguirus has a good design. He's got this great moment where he comes up from out of the ground and the dirt's shaking off of him. And it's just a really good monster moment, and he gets the beat down of his career at the hands of Mechagodzilla, and he gets his jaw hyperextended and it's gushing blood. And as a little kid, I always worried that he died from that. And I don't think that's what they're trying to imply. But Anguirus has his his usual look here, and he does his best, but he's no match.
No, not at all. And I like him as well. I like that they didn't modify his look too much because, like we said, we just seen him. What was it? 2 years prior in a Godzilla film. But I do like that he stands his ground, knowing that it's not Godzilla and it's an intruder. He still stands his ground and does what he can, because clearly Anguirus isn't the strongest monster or kaiju in these films. But he doesn't back down from a fight.
Does his best. Yep, does his best.
All right, how do you feel about King Caesar? My lady makes fun of King Caesar because as I was watching it the other day, she goes, "The one that looks like a dog?" It's like, yes, that one.
Yeah. I mean, he's kind of it's kind of a goofy design. He's kind of got this like shaggy, smiling dog design. It never really stuck out to me as like particularly like weird or bad or corny. Like maybe with modern eyes, when you do really look at it, you're so used to what all of these monsters look like that you just kind of think like, well, that's just King Caesar. That's just what he looks like. But yeah, seeing it, trying to see it without context, like, yeah, it's a little bit of a silly look, but I always kind of, I don't know, I always dug King Caesar. I always kind of liked him. He's a bit, the proportions and the shapes are kind of humanoid-esque in terms of like the body, the arms, the legs. And so he kind of gets a bit more like, that Ultraman style where there's like punching and kicking and throwing that kind of goes in. He's not terribly like monsterish in his proportions. So, it makes for interesting fight scenes. I love the cool ability that he has of taking Mechagodzilla's energy blast into one of his sort of jewel eyes and then blasting it out of the other eye. I always thought that was just the coolest ability.
And that was the first thing I was going to bring up was him being able to reflect that back at Mechagodzilla. And I just like how he is kind of like, and he has like animalistic and then also like human characteristics where he's like running at Mechagodzilla and tackling him and throwing punches, and like I like when his ears like perk up when like he first sees Mechagodzilla or whatever, and it's just like, oh, that's for little kids that's like a cute thing, but for us it's like, oh, like dogs or like animals actually do that when they sense something. It was a nice little like call out.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's this great sort of fight choreography shot where he runs at Mechagodzilla and Mechagodzilla swings and he ducks under it and then catches Mechagodzilla's next sort of punch and swing and kind of like judo throws him over his shoulder. And it's like and it's all in one shot, and it's like this great little like piece of fight choreography. And Godzilla has a couple of tag team partners in the 70s. He has Anguirus in Godzilla vs. Gigan. He has Jet Jaguar in Godzilla vs. Megalon. He has King Caesar here in Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. And I mean, I think King Caesar, gives either of those a run for their money as far as being like a good tag team partner for Godzilla. He certainly, in some ways, seems more useful than Anguirus and Jet Jaguar sometimes.
Yeah, there's another great scene where Godzilla is just like, he's holding Mechagodzilla and King Caesar is just like ramming him, almost like spearing him, like just straight into him, giving him the Goldberg treatment.
Yeah, it's excellent. It's excellent.
Yeah, so clearly we're both high on King Caesar or Caesar. So the Godzilla design, it's a 70s design. I mean, I still don't have a problem with it. I like it. But again, not much to say about it.
Yeah, the way it's filmed, and it might just be lighting and more cinematic sort of lighting choices and things like that. In Megalon, it feels a little lighter, a little sort of not as dark, but again, that's probably because all of those scenes are outside in broad daylight. In here, it seems like a little darker I mean, I think it works great. I think it works fine. I think it's it's the 70s Godzilla look, and it's iconic.
All right, on to the new guy, the probably one of Godzilla's greatest foes next to King Ghidorah, and that's the 1974 Mechagodzilla design, which soon here he will be added to what I'm trying to make into a Godzilla sleeve on my left arm. So,
Nice.
yeah, I was trying to decide like what design for Mechagodzilla, and you have to go with the 74. He's got like the elongated nostrils and just the finger missiles, the toe missiles. He's got so much character, and like I can't imagine how much time it took to actually design this suit and like all the little details and things on it. I love this Mechagodzilla design.
Yeah, I love that 70s sort of mecha design aesthetic. The bolts, the plating of the metal, the sort of this kind of like I don't know, accordion style material that they have for like the joints and the knees and stuff, like where it sort of bounces and compresses, like it moves and looks like it's moving as a machine. Like it's got this like functional stiffness to it and this mechanical sort of body language. Like I love the Mechagodzilla design. It's interesting because I don't think Mechagodzilla's ever had a bad design, really. I kind of love every Mechagodzilla design out there, but it's hard to kind of, the OG is the OG, the original is the original, and it's iconic for a reason. I love all of the abilities it has, the missile finger rockets, the sort of chest laser bolt, the spinning head that creates the force field. That's one of my favorite effects moments in the entire movie when Godzilla tries to push through it and it sears and burns the tips of his hands. Like it's just like such a seamless visual effects moment. I love Mechagodzilla in this movie. I love everything about him.
Absolutely. And I mean, we could probably look up a picture of him and just talk about him forever, just because it's so seamless. It's almost a perfect design for rival kaiju.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we could. What did you think of the aliens design when they get shot or killed and they turn back into like gorillas or apes type?
Planet of the Apes looking people.
Yeah.
I mean, they serve a functional part of the plot. They don't really stand out. They don't have like an iconic look like the Planet X aliens. The ape look, you can tell that it's like a Planet of the Apes kind of like vibe that they're going for. I think the Apes movies were kind of popular in the late 60s and 70s. So it just feels of the time. It's a little weird. It's a little wonky, but I mean, yeah, and those effects moments where they sort of transition from people to apes, like, I don't know, I feel like the apes thing was just put in to kind of give them something beyond them just being aliens that look like humans. But, it's take it or leave it. It's a functional part of the movie. It's not anything to write home about.
Yeah, and like you said, the Planet of the Apes, those movies were getting popular, and coming over to America, I think people might have seen that and thought it was like a little callback to those films and such.
I was just gonna say that I love when one of them gets shot and goes overboard, and like the scream always makes me. He's like, "Ooh!" The scream always makes me laugh. So I just had to give a shout out to that moment.
Yeah, that gives me a chuckle. And in the Japanese version, the guy who was they were arguing and fighting over the statue and whatnot. The comment he makes is he don't like the way he fell overboard. It was kind of like somebody shot him, and I was just like, you didn't hear the gunshot, or it didn't make a sound, or what happened?
Yeah, it's kind of like there are more subtle ways that they could have established that someone like the movie's not really being that hard at hiding it. Like anyone watching can kind of piece together what's going on. But, the characters kind of like brush it off almost even faster than like an audience member would. The characters just like, oh, whatever. Like, it's like, huh? It's like this is like clearly there's some wild shenanigans going on, and you guys are just like, moving on,
Moving on, just like us. No, nailed it. No.
Yeah, exactly.
But do you want to go into our tier list or our ranking list and see where the original 74 Mechagodzilla falls?
Yeah, because we can do it. You can go first, but yeah, we can do the rankings as of right now.
All right, I'll start from the bottom and go up. So at 14, we have All Monsters Attack. At 13, we have Godzilla Raids Again. 12, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster. 11, Ebirah Horror of the Deep. 10, Destroy All Monsters. 9, Son of Godzilla. 8, Godzilla vs. Hedorah. 7, Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla as of right now. 6, Godzilla vs. Megalon. 5, Godzilla vs. Gigan. 4, the original 54. 3, King Kong vs. Godzilla. 2, Invasion of Astro Monster. And then 1, Mothra vs. Godzilla. And I think this week the 4 I'm getting rid of or continuing on with that is All Monsters Attack, Ghidorah the Three-Headed Monster, Ebirah Horror of the Deep, and Son of Godzilla.
Okay. Your rankings are your own. Gosh, I'll give a little bit of a fun little like nudge that you're getting rid of Ghidorah and Son of Godzilla. Oh man, those sting a little bit, but each to their own. I'll whip out my list. So I've got 14 All Monsters Attack, 13 Godzilla vs. Megalon, 12 Ebirah, 11 Hedorah, 10 is Gigan, 9 is Raids Again, 8 is Invasion of Astro Monster, 7 is Son of Godzilla, 6 is Ghidorah, 5 is Destroy All Monsters, 4 would be Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla, 3 is King Kong vs. Godzilla, 2 is Mothra vs. Godzilla, and number 1 is the original Godzilla. For those that I would get rid of All Monsters Attack, Godzilla vs. Megalon, Ebirah Horror of the Deep, and Godzilla vs. Ghidorah.
We're not in agreement anymore. For the first little while, we were in agreement, and now we're drifting apart.
Yeah, We'll have to set up a moment where we each have like where we can have each of us have our list side by side of and what we're keeping, so we can kind of get more specific instead of like I'm listening to you and I'm like I'm trying to go off memory, but like we'll have to share our lists fully with each other so we can kind of nitpick at each other's rankings and choices.
Yeah, go back and forth. My 15, your 15.
Yeah, exactly. We can even do like, what do you have as number 1? What do you have as number 1? And just work our way down.
Well, that's our Showa era showdown. Once we're done with this next film, that's our next episode.
Absolutely.
That is all I have on the 1974's Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla. Do you have anything else on this one?
No, I clearly think very highly of this movie. I like all of the monster action, the monster scenes. There's a lot of interesting, unique monster effects and fights and displays of action. The score stands out. Jun Fukuda's sort of at his best doing this sort of hybrid sort of spy James Bondy mixed with a total monster throwdown movie, and I love it. He's at the peak of his powers with this movie, and I just think all of it kind of comes together where it's just the right amount of wacky with just the right amount of taking itself seriously enough to just kind of be, one of the strongest overall movies in the Showa era for me.
And I 100% agree with you. And when we get to our permanent rankings of the Showa era, I am going to do a deep dive back into these so I can get a definitive ranking for you, because it kind of just depends on the day of how I'm feeling. One day I'll like this in my top 5, and the next day it'll be number 8. So I'm going to have to dive in deep and be like, all right, I have one ranking for the rest of my life. How am I going to put it?
Oh, I don't know if I'll ever be able to decide on one ranking for the rest of my life, but I can decide on a general kind of consensus, give or take a spot up or down for some movies.
Yeah, and this film's a blast. I think the only reason it might be low right now is nostalgia for a couple other films, it's behind Megalon because I like Gigan so much and Jet Jaguar, but in a week or two, who knows, it could change. Like I said, I'm going to get my definitive ranking once we do the showdown, and I'm going to stick to it.
Yeah, and there's a lot of dynamics by which these movies can be ranked. There's entertainment value. I mean, if you were judging all of these movies on the strongest fundamentals and merits of filmmaking, a lot of these movies would maybe not even deserve to be very highly ranked on any list because they, products of their time and cheesy and stock footage and all this stuff. But, there's a lot of dynamics that go into them. You're comparing films from across decades, like you're not going to look at the original Godzilla or Raids Again and be like, oh, they're made in black and white, so that makes them bad because I like color movies. Everything's kind of on a curve. Everything's kind of taken in context. There's a lot of ways to look at it. And so you can get a lot of variations, with how you want to rank and value the movies.
Absolutely. And kids that are younger growing up nowadays, or that grew up, they were born in 2008 or something like that, the 2014 Godzilla might be their favorite because it was the first film they seen or whatnot,
Exactly.
It all just depends on taste and when you were born, what you like. And right now, our rankings are a little different, but that's all right. That could change.
Yeah. Yep.
But if that's all you got, that's all I have for the 74 Mechagodzilla. I appreciate you joining me on this one. Again, we'll be back for another one next week, which will be a direct sequel to this film. It was followed up in 1975 by Terror of Mechagodzilla, which is another one of my childhood favorites. So until that time, when we do that film, again, thanks, Chris, for joining me. I always appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. Always happy to be here. Looking forward to the next episode.
And until next week with Terror of Mechagodzilla, thanks everyone for joining me, and until next time.